City Council unanimously passed a resolution during last evening's meeting that granted the Sault Ste. Marie YMCA approval to go ahead with their plans to build a new facility at its current location on McNabb upon funding approval from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program Culture and Recreation stream. YMCA CEO Tracy Cook told Council the current 54-year-old building has aged to a point where it's no longer able to meet the needs of its members or the community at large. Cook said a recent assessment on the building showed over $3.5 million for current needs, as well as future needs and maintenance. The board of directors said a new building will cost $24 to $27 million. Cook said the YMCA will be required to contribute around 26.6% of the total cost of that project, and doing so through an aggressive capital campaign fundraiser. Cook explained that this will be an engaging process involving community input and ideas on what they would like to see their Y be. The new build will continue to include current services such as childcare spaces, community programming, health and wellness initiatives, and servicing the underserviced. The Ontario Energy Board says hydro rates for households and small businesses will be going up starting next week. The agency says rates are scheduled to increase by about $1.99 or 1.8% for a typical residential customer who uses 700 kilowatt hours per month. The provincial government said in March it would continue to subsidize hydro rates and hold any increases to the rate of inflation. The OEB says the new rates, which the board says are in line with inflation, will take effect November 1st and could be noticed on bills within a few weeks of that date. Prices are increasing partly due to government legislation aimed at reflecting the actual cost of supply on bills and partly due to the refurbishment of nuclear facilities. Changes to the look of hydro bills will also take effect next week, with a new line displaying the level of provincial rebates for customers. The so-called resistance force of Conservative premiers waging war against the carbon tax implemented by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau began showing cracks yesterday following the Liberals' re-election. While some of the 5 provincial leaders who had publicly criticized or legally challenged the carbon tax maintained their attacks in the hours after voters elected a minority Liberal government, at least one appeared to back down. The dissenter was New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs, who watched as residents handed 6 of his province's 10 seats to Liberals and 1 to a member of the Green Party during Monday's vote. Higgs paved the way for the province to come up with its own scheme to reduce carbon emissions, which would free New Brunswick from the federal carbon tax. The measure was introduced earlier this year and imposed upon provinces who had not implemented carbon-reducing regimes of their own. A top U.S. diplomat testified that President Donald Trump held back military aid for Ukraine unless the country agreed to investigate Democrats and a company linked to Joe Biden's family. AP obtained diplomat William Taylor's opening statement.
As to what has been printed, that describes more evidence of a direct connection between President Trump's wishes that Ukraine investigate the 2016 election, essentially exonerating the Russians, and his potential 2020 opponent, Vice President Biden and his family, in exchange for President Zelensky in Ukraine to get a White House meeting and security assistance. It's clearly illustrated that this is not just rogue Rudy Giuliani self-dealing in Ukraine. He's an agent of the president. The president is his client. Anything Rudy Giuliani does is on behalf of the president. So Rudy is President Trump is Rudy. But you also see this second sharp, straight line between Ambassador Sondland and President Trump. So you have President Trump giving directives to Rudy Giuliani and also Ambassador Sondland from what was printed.
Police say a teenage gunman returned to class yesterday after shooting a fellow student multiple times just outside a Northern California high school, an attack that prompted a lockdown in a complex with 3 schools for hours.
So the victim was 16 years old and the suspect is 17 years old. They're both students at Ridgeway High School, and the evidence shows that they had a verbal altercation fronting the school grounds. The suspect produced a handgun, fired multiple rounds, and the victim was struck twice. It also appears that this was an isolated act of violence between those two individuals. Officers learned that the shooter had handed the gun to another individual, and that individual left the school campus with that firearm. The shooter actually returned to a classroom there on the Ridgeway High School campus and was identified by officers who worked in close coordination with the school officials and the school resource officer in the scene, and safely took the shooter into custody.